Hello and welcome to this Be Heard Town Hall. I'm BrianVines and we're coming to you live tonight from Brick House. We're meeting to talk about some very important things, namely the people, the press, and the president. That, of course, is the title of this town hall that we're presenting in conjunction with the folks from the Columbia Journalism Review, who've been our fine partners in presenting this evening. We're very happy to have them on board, as well as you watching. And the lovely audience assembled here at Brick House, thank you for spending part of your weekend with particular. I'm looking at Kyle Pope right now, who is the editor at the Columbia, editor and publisher at the Columbia Journalism Review, who, as I said, also happens to be our presenting partner. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having me.
Naomi, yeah, that's it. But we're sure that you love them all. We want to keep it tight so we can get lots of questions. So that was a collective clap. Naomi Wolf is worthy of applause, of course. She is an author and former member of the political advisement team to both the Clinton and Gore campaigns. She's also got a new venture, a civic tech startup called Daily Clout. Thank you for joining us this evening. And Walter Mosley is the acclaimed novelist, of course. He's also a social commentator, and he has a very interesting new book out where he does get to flex his social commentary muscles. He also happens to be on the editorial board of The Nation. Thank you for joining us, sir. And directly across from him is Mr. Jeff Jarvis, who's a professor at CUNY's Graduate School of Journalism and the director of the Tao Knight Center for Entrepreneurial Journalism. He's got a few side ventures as well that I'm sure he's going to clue us into. Ali Garab is the chief politics editor at Mike News. He's also been a foreign policy reporter for years and spent some time at The Nation as well. Thanks for joining us, Ali. And finally, Cheryl Higgins Solomon is the senior editor at large for one of my daily clicks at theroot.com. Thank you for joining us this evening. So we are going to start now with just a quick answer question for you guys. There's a stat that's been maybe something that he heard on Freakonomics about public trust eroding in the media. And I have a number here, something like 32% is where we are. 32% of the people believe in the media. We're at an all-time low. Back in 1997, it was about 57%. So I'm going to start down here with you, Cheryl, and ask, what do those numbers mean to you?
Those numbers mean a lot, and I mean, as you can see, it's something that's been happening for a while. What it means is that, you know, there was a time when you had three major, television stations, you had newspapers of record, and I think, and they had a gatekeeper, function, I think. And what's happened over time is certainly with the internet, with social media and everything, all that's been blown wide open. Yeah. So people have all of these sources of information now, and there's so much, but what they don't necessarily have is skills, training, or the knowledge of how to know what's credible, what's not credible. And so I think what they're doing is just defaulting and saying, I don't believe any of it.
All right, Mr. Jarvis, you're training a whole new generation of journalists entrepreneurially, and that includes a big digital space. So what world are you preparing them for when people don't believe them?
I think a few things are going on here. One is that trust started falling way before the internet in the 70s. And I'm coming to see lately that I wonder whether it wasn't because the press destroyed the president of the right half of America, the conservative half of America. Now I think something much larger is going on. Now I think we have an institutional revolution. And that institutions as a whole are untrusted. And that there's an ability of the public to challenge every possible institution out there. And the institutions are going to have to update themselves or die. And we're in that boat along with government and the academe and all kinds of institutions. I think we're at a Gutenberg moment of change right now, and we don't know how it's going to turn out.
Well, Ms. Wolf, this is the environment into which you're launching your new venture. So are you hardened by this?
I mean, I'm not hardened as an American. It's sad that there's so little faith in entities that we need. I think that, yes, news organizations have faced an economic revolution in which they literally don't have the people to cover local news, certainly regional news or international news, the way they used to. I also think terrorism and hyping stories about terrorism has crowded out what used to be scrutiny of public officials, infrastructure problems, public education problems, looking at our own issues. But I also do kind of feel hardened, and certainly being in the civic tech space very much encourages me, because I think that in addition to that decline, which is sad, people have gotten smarter. Like, the internet has made people smarter and more empowered to ask critical questions. For example, my community, which reaches 4.5 million around the world. I know that's a
Soon.
slip.
Soon to be, yes.
More people than there are on the planet. But we had a high of 4.5 million. And they are crowdsourcing and asking rigorous questions about the news. And one of the things they're noticing is that major news outlets like the New York Times are single sourcing very important stories. There's such a drumbeat of stories that are thinly sourced, that are atrocity stories, that are disaster stories, always with that drumbeat to war. So it's a kind of perfect storm of underfunding, institutions stretched thin, people taking dictation from elected officials because they're scared to lose access, and hearteningly, people getting smarter and saying, where's that second source?
I'm not against the media, the press, only against the fake news.
One person's fake news is another person's news.
It's fake, phony, fake.
This morning, President Trump again called fake news.
Fake news, outrageous and salacious.
Give us a chance. You are attacking our news organization. Can you give us a chance to ask a question, sir? Go ahead. Sir, can you state...
Dismissal of the mainstream media as a kind of policy is very strategic. It makes their argument a matter of discussion. It creates the legitimacy of that argument as something that needs to be debated and assessed. And then it creates media self-doubt about how they're performing. Public trust in the media is really critical. A well-informed public making rational choices about matters of public interest, right? That's the promise and premise of democratic theory.
I don't trust mainstream media, and at times I don't even trust independent media.
It's good to have a free press, but what's good is a free press if they don't tell the truth? What good is a free press if they're adversarial based on some emotional idea that they have? When I was growing up, politics wasn't really a matter for discussion. My family was into John F. Kennedy. That was back when the Democrat Party was asked not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, and that whole attitude.
My parents have very religious views. For the most part, the things that I was fed were pretty conservative. As soon as I kind of had my own agency, I definitely became more of a left-leaning person. My main news source is the Pacifica Network, WBAI. I read the New York Times when I can, and I listen to NPR.
I use the internet, and I don't know if you'll like this, but I go on the Drudge Report.
We all are broadcasters now. We are all sort of news disseminators. And I think that it makes the distribution and dissemination of stories that are unchecked much easier.
It's exhausting to feel like you have to check 4 or 5 different sources just to confirm that a piece of news is in fact what you first heard reported. The average person who's not involved with journalism probably doesn't have time for that or the energy to really invest.
You have to follow the money, right? So I guess NBC, CBS, these are real big corporations. They get benefits from having good links with the government and getting there. Somehow money's coming back to them. There's no doubt about that. The left wing is controlling the press.
Mainstream media is hijacked by corporate sponsors. So I rarely feel like the news is too left for me.
What the Republicans say and what the Democrats say and what the Republicans say. And that kind of back and forth has a real narrowing effect on what gets talked about.
I definitely trust the media more than I trust Trump. I trust the media over him when he makes claims about fake news.
The fact that they have excluded media organizations like the New York Times and CNN and others from press briefing is a really startling development.
Trump doesn't want to suppress the press and suppress broadcasting. Just because he doesn't let them into the news conference, in my opinion, is like no big deal whatsoever. And the only reason it's concerning them is because it hurts their pride. He's a master of using it. Why would he want to suppress it?
There's a kind of authoritarian bravado in this administration, and I think that one of their strategies is to create doubt about every institution that provides a check on their power.
I don't check mainstream news sources like MSNBC or CNN, mostly for my own mental health.
People who are sort of depend on their local little newspaper, and then they sort of turn on the nightly news and they get blood, right? They get celebrity. That feeds a kind of anxiety, right, about both the world they live in and a kind of distrust of the sources.
Press should stick to telling us who, what, when, where, and leave why for the opinion page.
I definitely think there's an attack on the press, and it's like the most aggressive form of attack I think I've ever seen on the media. A free press is a press that can report on anything without being afraid of persecution.
But if you're writing a news story, you have the freedom to go to question anybody in the government about whatever question you want to ask them. And that's free press.
One of the reasons it broke, I mean, we've talked about, that institutions are under strain and people don't trust institutions. The problem is the press forgot that it wasn't supposed to be part of the establishment. They forgot that it was supposed to be oppositional. And I think that, in a way, I think there was a very savvy sense that that the press wasn't serving readers. I guess what I mean is that, when for a long time, reporters were people who hung out at bars and lived in blue-collar parts of town, and sort of there was a clash.
Right.
And over time, the press became closer and closer and closer to the points of power.
Yeah.
And they became much more enmeshed in the establishment, and they became much more dependent on access. Yeah. And they frankly didn't become a voice of people who were looking for a voice. And I think that people sensed that, and that I think helped create this distance.
Well, there's this idea. We're sitting here in Brooklyn. We're those East Coast elites that everyone was talking about. That we've been pitted against these Rust Belt, salt of the earth coal miners who want their jobs back, and we are the ones who are creating these narratives. So this media elite idea. We're not sitting shoulder to shoulder at a bar anymore, being blue-collar people.
I think the press fundamentally failed the public in this last election. If our job is to inform the public conversation, by the conversation we had in this last election, we failed miserably. And I don't just say that as an insult to Trump voters. I say that if you look at the credibility and quality of the public conversation, it was ill-informed. And that's our fundamental job, and we're not doing it, and we're not rethinking it. We, I think, are in the last gasp of the mass media business. Wow. What the internet killed was the mass media business model, and with it mass media, and with it the notion of the mass. You're not all a mass. You're individuals and members of communities. We put out a product that is meant for the mass. Google and Facebook are personal services companies that know us as individuals and members of communities. We're still putting out a mass product under a mass business model. It leads to clickbait cats and Kardashians. It leads directly to Trump, who is the clickbait candidate. And we have failed fundamentally in journalism, and we have to reinvent it from the ground up. The reason I teach now is because I go to the students every fall and I say, it's up to you to reinvent journalism. I'm too old. It's going to take too long. But we have to fundamentally rethink what it can be, and that's about serving communities. There are too many communities in this nation that are not represented and reflected in media, and that's part of the reason they don't trust. And mass media will not reflect them. We have to reinvent media around communities.
But also, I mean, I think that there's a mass media crisis that goes beyond just journalism and the news business. That speaks to the same problem that is in a lot of journalism in the news business, that's about the corporate media. And, you know, you have NBC television, which made hundreds of millions of dollars editing a show to make Donald Trump into this kind of funny hero that fires people from their jobs, when all along, I mean, this man has been a monster since he's had a public face, and we've all known it. We all saw what he did with the Central Park Five. We've known all this stuff, and they made him into kind of a folk hero, this like boardroom corporate folk hero, and made hundreds of millions of dollars off it, paid him hundreds of millions of dollars, and made him to this okay guy that made him a recognizable face. And he like, should we be surprised that a reality TV guy gets elected president when more people vote for American Idol than in the presidential election? Like, there's a fundamental breakdown happening here that has to do with mass media on a scale that's way beyond just journalism. I mean, there's a problem there too, but it's way beyond that.
So if we're taking that turn from this mass media omnibus sort of thing, I want to go to you. This is something that I read on the route. If you as a member of the public don't trust the media right now, remember that you get what you pay for. Lifting up reporting, as I mentioned earlier, means that sometimes you must pay a subscription fee. You wrote that.
Absolutely.
So does news only belong to the people who can pay to click through?
No. It belongs to everyone, but we can't be fooled by the fact that those who provide credible news work for a living, right? So I think that the public does have a role to play. And Naomi, you alluded earlier to the fact of local media and the fact that there's really been an implosion, right? So you've got a whole layer of information that people are no longer getting about that reflects the world directly around them. What they're left with is the noise at the national level. What they're left with is, unfortunately, because, you know, as we were talking about, the media, the mass media has become so corporate, for ratings, for traffic, for clicks, what's happening is they're following the distractions, which we now have a president who will easily provide them, following those things that are viral, right? And in the process, not telling the stories to the degree that we need to that affect people on the ground.
The model of free news, as beautiful as it seems, is literally unsustainable, and you literally cannot hire, like people at the regional, local level are being laid off since 2013 in hundreds, right?
But doesn't that redline journalism and mean it's only for those who can afford to pay for it?
No, but let's take a moment here, because, you know, the left always makes the perfect the enemy of the good, and it ends up with us not moving forward at all. People have always paid for newspapers. People have always paid for newspapers. They have. And there used to be models like classified ads, which got eaten up by cars.com, and employment listings, which got eaten up by monster.com, that used to support and pay for those really important local papers like the Stockton Record and the Sacramento Bee that are now struggling so hard, let alone national news. But what I'm saying is, just like you pay for, you know, Starbucks, and sure, there can be libraries getting news for free, there can be schools getting news for free, but if we are going to save journalism, we have to have a grassroots movement for people to pay even a little bit.
Being a black man in America, all news is fake news. All news is fake news. I was a kid, I was watching television. There were no black people. I always wondered, I said, Dad, Mom is white and the people in the television white and everybody else is black? And my father laughed at me, but that's okay. You know, I think that, I'm just wondering the way that the questions are being asked, you know, because I'm not concerned with the industry. I mean, I don't care. I don't give a fuck. I mean, excuse me. I don't care about the industry. It's like, I know there's not that 10-minute lapse, I'm sorry.
Delay button, yes.
Yeah. The thing is this. is it a problem that people are not believing the news? Being, having my particular history in America, there's no problem in not believing the news.
There's a long tradition of African-American newspapers in America that goes back like a century.
The black press is there, and it is impoverished, but I also think that African Americans, if we want news about our community, have to be more supportive.
Which means what exactly?
What it means is paying
for the
subscriptions. Well, I don't think we're going to go back to the days when the local news source or the source about communities are going to be just newspapers.
Okay.
I mean, it's gone to digital. You have hyperlocal sites now. You have websites like The Root, like Ebony.com, like Black Voices, that are covering issues that matter to us, but we do have to be willing to support. If they're subscriber supported, then we have to be willing to pay for subscriptions. If they're
I'm with you. There are some really exciting examples, and maybe I'm just very happy because I'm at Civic Hall every day, where it's all these millennials inventing new ways for people to engage with news and with politics. But I'm with you. Like, you look at Democracy Now!, Amy Goodman, right? It's just a woman who's saying very gutsy things to power, and she's got a subscription base, or a base that's non-corporate.
So that leads me to the question, though. Had the Electoral College not elected Donald Trump, would we all be here tonight talking about this subject?
No.
Yes.
I don't think
I got a no, I got a yes. Anyone?
I don't think we would.
You don't think we would?
No. I think he catalyzed. I think a lot of these issues have been floating around, and he catalyzed them. And frankly, I think it's going to be good for journalism. I think Donald Trump is going to be good for journalism in the long run because it's forcing us to address these issues. I'm convinced we would not be having this conversation if either of the other candidates was in office. And a lot of the issues that desperately need to be fixed in journalism, like the over-reliance on access, the lack of diversity in newsrooms, the lack of a news infrastructure outside of the sort of major media centers, we would not be addressing these issues if this hadn't happened. So
well said.
I think we have to sort of say, like, this, at what price did this happen? But the fact that it happened is good for journalism.
There were 6 national names during the Obama years that were consistently critical of Obama's attacks on the press and on civil liberties and on freedoms and democracy, and they were Glenn Greenwald. I mean, I won't go through all of them, but they were not many. And the left decided, well, we have one of our guys in the White House. It's fine when he sends his Justice Department to engage in the most consistent attack on the press and whistleblowers. I don't think we would be out of the woods with a Mrs. Clinton administration where she would be doubling up Guantanamo, doubling up drones, doubling up attacks on freedoms of the press.
I want to connect some dots with Bernie Sanders and with the silence from the press about his campaign. Did you feel embarrassed, ashamed that Bernie was completely blocked out of the media?
I think, unfortunately, especially the mainstream press bought into the narrative that Hillary was a shoo-in. I mean, I think it's really as simple as that. And I think it also uncovers, again, the fact that, as we've said, mainstream press was largely out of touch with what people were saying and what people were thinking and feeling. And so that's what it comes down to. And because of that, and here's the other thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just President Trump who's a master at manipulating the media. Obviously, candidate Trump, and then before that, real estate mogul Trump, is a master at that.
Yeah.
So the fact is, he was great for ratings. He was great for. He is great for traffic.
Even in the ethnic
clickbait.
media
Yes.
specifically?
I'm sorry?
In the ethnic media specifically? How did that play?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, we love that.
But this feeds into what I call the outrage machine. Okay, now not only the ethnic media have it, all media have, especially media that focus on whether it's millennials, whether it's women, whether it's African Americans,
Affinity group. Yeah.
Yes. He throws out something that's just so outrageous. Everybody, it goes viral.
Yeah.
Right? Hashtag goes viral. And before you know it, that's what we're focusing on.
We should be very open to changing the form of journalism. Jimmy Wales, founder of Wikipedia, just announced Wiki Tribune, an effort to have professional journalists work alongside volunteers to fact check and work together, and I think create a new flow and a new form of journalism. I think this is an exciting time to reinvent journalism and its forms, and so I hope that we can do that. I think that, did BuzzFeed take it too far? Yeah, maybe. But I think that I've learned that they also made us see new forms. And I think we've got to take journalism to people where the conversation occurs. We've got to make memes in Facebook. We've got to make videos in Facebook and YouTube. You look at things like Cenk Uygur used YouTube to create a new form of what we used to think of as television. I think that's really valuable and exciting.
The media is the problem in America. We all know it. When we were given two candidates like we got, and the media did not rebel against that and give us two better, they're the problem.
What would you have liked the media to have done?
At least give Bernie a shot. They never went with Bernie at all. No media for Bernie at all.
I'm sorry, I'm going to push back. I was at a Bernie rally. I reported on Bernie.
All the rallies,
everyone else was there. What do you mean they didn't report at all? Just name it for me. Draw that out.
CNN? Let's look at the coverage. I have it all on DVD. Let's look at the coverage in CNN. Wow. None. 0. 10 minutes. Little blurbs here and there. Come on. Really. Hillary constantly bombarding. And Trump manipulating the media the way he did, there was no room for anyone else. This is exactly what we needed, right? Yeah. This guy there running the country, well, this is what we get.
But yeah, I mean, I completely agree that there's a big problem, especially, I mean, a lot of the problems that you see with the press and media that I think we've been talking about tonight are especially acute on cable news. It is, it's sometimes tough to decide, like, what's worse for the national political discourse, cable news or Twitter. But, cable news just reaches such a huge audience and is so influential, and you can tell that lots of politicians play games, like that was Donald Trump's game, right? He watches cable news. He wants to be on it. He knows the things that he's going to say are going to be wild and get covered. Yeah. Yep. And politicians play games to get on those
we let them.
Networks.